My son's bride tried to murder me at their wedding reception. The moment I saw her slip something into my champagne was when I knew my son had married a killer. Not a potential killer, not someone who might someday cross that line. A woman who had already decided my fate, calculated my death, and chosen my son's wedding day as the perfect cover. My name is Dolores Green. I'm 67 years old, and until that day, I thought I understood people. After teaching high school English for 4 decades, I'd seen the full spectrum of human behavior, or so I believed. But nothing prepared me for what happened at Thomas's wedding. My only son, my beautiful boy. I raised him alone after his father died when Thomas was just 7. We survived together, just the two of us, in our small house on the outskirts of Atlanta. I worked double shifts, graded papers late into the night, and somehow managed to put him through college. When he graduated with honors, no mother could have been prouder. Then he met Vanessa. She came into his life like a whirlwind, beautiful, charming, always saying exactly what people wanted to hear. Thomas was smitten immediately. I tried to be happy for him, I really did, but something about her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. "She's perfect, Mom," Thomas would say, squeezing my hand. "You'll grow to love her too." But over the 2 years they dated, that feeling in my gut never went away. The way she'd check Thomas's phone when he wasn't looking, how she'd isolate him from his childhood friends, the strange calls she'd take in whispered tones, stepping outside where no one could hear. I kept my concerns to myself. What mother wants to be the villain in her son's love story? The wedding was lavish, far beyond what Thomas could afford on his teacher's salary. Vanessa insisted her family connections were covering the costs. 300 guests in a historic mansion with crystal chandeliers and a string quartet. Thomas looked handsome in his tuxedo, nervous but happy. During the reception, I was seated at the head table between Thomas and his best friend, Kyle. Vanessa floated around the room, accepting congratulations, her white dress catching the light. Perfect. Practiced. The server brought champagne for the toast. I was watching Thomas laugh with Kyle when I caught a flash of movement from the corner of my eye. Vanessa had returned to the table, leaning over my glass for just a second. Something small and silver glinted between her fingers, a tiny vial. A drop of clear liquid fell into my champagne. My blood turned to ice. In that split second, everything clicked into place. The excessive life insurance policy Thomas mentioned she'd insisted they get, the questions about my health, my will, my assets, the convenient seating chart putting me right where she could reach my drink. She didn't see me watching. No one did. When she turned to greet another guest, I made my decision. With steady hands that betrayed nothing of the storm inside me, I switched our glasses. My poisoned champagne was now in front of her seat, her untouched glass now before me. The toasts began. Thomas stood, emotional as he thanked everyone for coming. Vanessa returned, sliding gracefully into her seat beside him, squeezing his hand lovingly as he spoke. When he finished, everyone raised their glasses. "To the bride and groom," they cheered. Vanessa lifted my poisoned glass to her perfect red lips and drank deeply. I sipped from her glass, our eyes meeting over the rims. In that moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Confidence, satisfaction, the look of someone who believes they've won. Little did she know, the game had changed. Have you ever wondered if someone close to you is hiding something deadly? Have you ever caught that flash of something wrong, something that disappeared so quickly you convinced yourself you imagined it? I didn't imagine it, and what happened next would change our family forever. I met Thomas's father when we were both 19. Richard was kind, brilliant, and gone too soon. A heart attack took him when our son was just 7 years old. The night Richard died, I held Thomas as he cried himself to sleep, promising him we would make it through together. And we did. Every morning, I'd wake Thomas with a gentle knock on his door. "Rise and shine, my brilliant boy," I'd say. Every evening, no matter how tired I was from teaching, I'd sit at our kitchen table helping with homework, discussing books, or just listening to his dreams. We had our struggles. Those teenage years tested us both, but our bond remained unbreakable. Or so I thought. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man who inherited his father's gentle eyes and my stubborn determination. He chose teaching, like me, working with elementary school children who adored him. My heart swelled watching him with his students, patient, kind, encouraging. He was everything a mother hopes her son will become. Then, Vanessa walked into his classroom one day to pick up her nephew. "Mom, I met someone," Thomas told me over dinner that week, his eyes bright with excitement. "She's different from anyone I've ever known." Different indeed. Vanessa was striking, tall and elegant, with a sharp intelligence that commanded attention. 10 years younger than Thomas, she worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveling frequently and earning far more than a teacher's salary. When Thomas first brought her to Sunday dinner, she arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and compliments that felt rehearsed but effective. "Your son speaks of you with such admiration, Mrs. Green," she said, touching my arm. "I feel like I already know you." But did I know her? Looking back, the warning signs were there from the beginning. The first time Thomas canceled our weekly dinner, he seemed uncomfortable on the phone. "Vanessa thinks we should start creating our own traditions," he explained. When I visited their apartment, I noticed his cherished book collection, passed down from his father, was gone from the shelves. "We're minimizing," Vanessa explained with a tight smile. Thomas agreed they were just collecting dust. But he never looked me in the eye when she said it. Then came the changes in Thomas himself. My son, who once called daily, now went weeks without reaching out. The teacher who volunteered extra hours suddenly had no time because Vanessa had planned their weekends. His childhood friends stopped receiving invitations to their home. "Kyle's just at a different stage in life," Thomas would say, repeating words that never sounded like his own. I remember the afternoon I stopped by their apartment unexpectedly with soup when Thomas had the flu. Vanessa answered the door, clearly annoyed by my presence. "He's resting," she said, blocking the entrance. From inside, I heard Thomas call out, "Who is it?" "No one important," she replied, her eyes never leaving mine. "Just someone selling something." That night, Thomas didn't return my calls. When they announced their engagement after just 11 months of dating, I forced a smile and hugged them both. What else could I do? Thomas looked happy, or perhaps desperate to be happy. I couldn't tell anymore. The wedding planning consumed the next 6 months. Vanessa took control of every detail, including who from Thomas's life would be invited. "Your mother's list is too long," I overheard her telling him. "We need to cut it in half. These people from your childhood, they don't matter anymore. We're building something new." Thomas just nodded, avoiding conflict as he always did. 3 weeks before the wedding, I drove to Thomas's apartment to drop off his father's cufflinks, the ones Richard had worn at our wedding. Thomas wasn't home, but as I approached the door, I heard Vanessa on the phone. "Everything's on track," she was saying, her voice low and focused. "The old lady has no idea. Once we're married, the policy pays double, $2 million instead of $1 million. A pause. "Of course, Thomas doesn't suspect anything. He's as clueless as his mother." My hand froze before knocking. What policy was she talking about? "We just need to be patient," Vanessa continued. "The wedding first, then we wait 3 months so it doesn't look suspicious. After that, nature takes its course, or gets a little help." The laugh that followed chilled me to my core. I backed away silently, my mind racing. That night, I called Thomas, trying to sound casual, as I asked if he and Vanessa had taken out life insurance policies. "How did you know?" He sounded surprised. "It was Vanessa's idea. Said it was the responsible thing to do once we're married. She even insisted we include you in a policy. Isn't that thoughtful?" Thoughtful. Yes. That was when I knew my son was in danger. But so was I. Would you have noticed these warning signs that I missed? Would you have connected the dots before it was almost too late? Or would you have done what I did? Doubt yourself, make excuses, and hope you were wrong about the woman your son loved? Because the worst was yet to come, and what I discovered the morning of the wedding would make the poisoned champagne seem almost merciful in comparison. The morning of my son's wedding dawned with perfect blue skies, the kind you pray for but rarely get in Georgia during late spring. The historic Rosewood Manor, with its columns and sprawling gardens, looked like it belonged in a dream. As mother of the groom, I arrived early, my new dress carefully pressed, my smile fixed firmly in place. For Thomas, I would pretend. For Thomas, I would watch. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock, giving me hours to observe. The wedding coordinator bustled about, directing florists and caterers with military precision. Thomas arrived with his groomsmen, his face a mixture of nerves and joy that squeezed my heart. My boy was getting married. Under any other circumstances, this would have been the happiest day. "You look handsome," I told him, straightening his tie the way I had before his first school dance. "Your father would be so proud." His eyes misted. "I wish he was here." "I am," I said, meaning it. "He's watching over you." And so was I. Vanessa arrived at noon, sequestered in the bridal suite with her small entourage. No family of her own attended. Another red flag I'd overlooked. "My parents are deceased, and I'm not close with extended family," she'd explained months ago. No childhood friends, no college roommates. A woman without a past. As the guests began arriving, I positioned myself where I could observe without drawing attention. Kyle, Thomas's best man since 4th grade, found me near the rose garden. "Mrs. Green," he hugged me warmly. "How are you holding up?" The genuine concern in his eyes nearly broke my carefully constructed facade. Kyle had been distanced from Thomas since Vanessa arrived. He knew something was wrong. "I'm making it through," I replied carefully. "Keep your eyes open today, Kyle." He nodded, understanding more than I said. The ceremony itself was flawless. Vanessa floated down the aisle like a vision, her dress catching the golden afternoon light. Thomas's face, when he saw her, full of wonder and love, made me question everything I suspected. Could I be wrong? Could this all be the paranoid fears of a mother unwilling to let go? Then I caught the split-second calculation in Vanessa's eyes as she passed me. Not the warm glance of a bride to her new mother-in-law, but something measuring, assessing. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes were cold. During the vows, I watched her performance, because that's what it was. Each emotional response perfectly timed, each tear precisely placed. When Thomas's voice broke with emotion, promising to cherish her forever, Vanessa squeezed his hands and mouthed, "I love you," for all to see. The audience sighed. Only I noticed how quickly her expression reset when she turned away from them. At the reception, small moments accumulated like drops of water before a flood. The way Vanessa kept checking her watch during the first dance. How she pulled Thomas away whenever Kyle tried to speak with him alone. The convenient bathroom break she took when the photographer suggested,
family photos with me. But most telling was what happened during the cake cutting. As Thomas playfully fed Vanessa a small bite, photographer flashes capturing the moment, she whispered something in his ear. His smile faltered, just a second, before returning with less brightness. When he turned to offer me a piece, Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm. "Actually," she interjected sweetly, "we need to greet the Richardsons first. Protocol, you know." Thomas looked torn. "Mom, I'll be right back." They never came back to my table. As the reception continued, I noticed Vanessa growing increasingly agitated. She checked her phone repeatedly, stepping away from conversations mid-sentence. After the third time, I decided to follow her. She slipped through the French doors onto a secluded terrace, looking over her shoulder before pulling out her phone. I moved closer, hidden behind a large potted plant, straining to hear. "It's me," she hissed into the phone. "We have a problem. The lawyer called. There's an issue with the insurance policy." She paused, listening. "No," he said, "there's a contestability period. If anything happens to her within 2 years of policy inception, they investigate thoroughly." My heart pounded so loudly I feared she would hear it. "So we wait," she continued, frustration evident. "Yes, I know what we agreed, but I'm not going to prison for this." Another pause. "The money's not going anywhere. The old woman still trusts Thomas completely." She lowered her voice further, forcing me to lean closer. "I've got something that'll work tonight. Untraceable. Looks like heart failure. I'll slip it in her drink during the toast. No one will question an elderly woman having heart problems." The champagne, the toast, it all made sense now. "Thomas won't suspect anything. He'll be too devastated to question it, especially when I'm there to comfort him through his loss." Her cold laugh drifted through the evening air. "By this time tomorrow, we'll be on our honeymoon, and his dear mother will be on her way to the morgue." I backed away silently, my mind racing. This wasn't just about insurance money anymore. This was my life, my son's future. Everything I loved was at stake. As I returned to the reception, the announcement came for guests to gather for the champagne toast. Servers moved through the crowd with trays of crystal flutes. Thomas waved me over to the head table, his face glowing with happiness. Vanessa returned moments later, smoothly taking her place beside him. When our eyes met, she smiled. A predator's smile. The servers placed champagne glasses before each of us. Family events hide the darkest secrets. What's the most disturbing thing you've witnessed at a wedding? Perhaps nothing as deadly as what I was about to experience as I watched my new daughter-in-law's perfectly manicured hand hover near my drink, waiting for her moment.
Time slowed as the crystal flutes caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. Thomas was deep in conversation with his best man, his back partially turned to us. The other guests at the head table were distracted by the photographer capturing candid moments. No one was watching Vanessa. No one except me. She moved with practiced grace, her wedding gown rustling softly as she leaned across the table, ostensibly reaching for a napkin. With one fluid motion, her right hand dipped into her bodice, emerging with the tiny silver vial I'd glimpsed earlier. Her eyes flicked around the room, checking for witnesses, but never landed on me. She thought I was watching the string quartet in the corner. I kept my face neutral, my breathing steady. 40 years of maintaining classroom control had taught me how to hide my emotions. Inside, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Vanessa's thumb slid across the vial, popping the cap with practiced ease. A quick tilt of her wrist, and 3 clear drops fell into my champagne. They dissolved instantly, leaving no trace in the bubbling golden liquid. Had I blinked, I would have missed it entirely. She tucked the vial away, satisfaction briefly crossing her features before her mask of bridal joy returned. 3 drops. Just 3 tiny drops to end my life. I had perhaps 2 minutes before the toasts would begin. 2 minutes to decide my fate and hers. My hands remained folded in my lap, steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I'd faced down classroom bullies, navigated school board politics, and raised a son alone after burying my husband. I would not fall victim to this woman. Not today. Not at my son's wedding. The decision came with perfect clarity. If I confronted her now, it would be her word against mine. Thomas would be torn apart, forced to choose between his new wife and his mother. The beautiful wedding would collapse into chaos, leaving permanent scars on my son. And without proof, would anyone believe me? No. I needed Vanessa to reveal herself. "Ladies and gentlemen," the wedding planner's voice rang out across the reception. "If you'll all find your seats, we're ready for the toasts." Thomas returned to his chair, kissing Vanessa's cheek before sitting down. Kyle stood, champagne in hand, ready to begin his best man speech. It was now or never. I waited for a burst of laughter at Kyle's first joke, then made my move. With deliberate casualness, I reached for my water glass, accidentally knocking over an empty bread basket. As all eyes turned to the small commotion, I smoothly switched my poisoned champagne with Vanessa's untouched glass. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, righting the basket. "Clumsy me." Vanessa's attention had been on Kyle's speech. She hadn't noticed. Kyle's toast was heartfelt, full of childhood memories and hopes for the future. Thomas wiped away a tear, and even I felt a lump in my throat, despite the danger pulsing around us. When Kyle finished, he raised his glass high. "To Thomas and Vanessa, may your love story continue for decades to come." "To Thomas and Vanessa," the crowd echoed. Everyone lifted their glasses. Thomas turned to clink his glass with mine, then with Vanessa's. I took a small sip from the safe champagne, watching over the rim as Vanessa raised my poisoned glass to her perfectly painted lips. Our eyes met for just a moment. Did something flicker across her face? A momentary doubt? If so, it vanished quickly. She smiled, that cold, calculating smile, and took a long, deep drink. I sipped my champagne slowly, watching her. Thomas's mother was giving her toast now, but the words floated past me, unheard. I was counting seconds in my head, wondering how long whatever she'd used would take to act. Vanessa placed her glass down, dabbing her lips with a napkin. She leaned close to Thomas, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh. To any observer, we were simply a family celebrating. Only I knew the truth hanging in the balance. 10 minutes passed, more toasts, more laughter. Vanessa showed no signs of distress. Had I been wrong? Had she not poisoned the champagne after all? Or had she used something that would affect me later, after the reception? Then I noticed it, a slight furrow between her brows. She pressed her hand to her chest, took a quick, shallow breath. Her other hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. Thomas noticed too. "Honey, are you okay?" "Fine," she said, voice strained. "Just warm in here." But she wasn't fine. A flush crept up her neck. She reached for her water, but her hand trembled so badly she knocked it over. Ice water spilled across the tablecloth and into her lap. "Vanessa," Thomas's voice rose with concern. She tried to stand, perhaps heading for the bathroom, but her legs buckled. Thomas caught her before she hit the floor. Her body went rigid in his arms, then began to convulse. "Call an ambulance," Thomas shouted, lowering her to the ground. "Something's wrong." The reception dissolved into chaos. Guests rushed forward, others backed away. Someone shouted for a doctor. The wedding planner frantically dialed 911. I remained seated, outwardly shocked like everyone else, inwardly calm. I knew exactly what was happening. Thomas cradled his bride, tears streaming down his face as her body jerked uncontrollably. "Vanessa, please, hold on!" I knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "The ambulance is coming," I assured him. Vanessa's eyes found mine over Thomas's shoulder. In that moment, awareness dawned. She knew. Her gaze held confusion, then fury, then fear, as another convulsion tore through her. "You!" she gasped, the single word barely audible to anyone but me. "Yes," I whispered back, my voice gentle as a mother's lullaby. "Me." Her eyes widened in understanding before rolling back as she lost consciousness. The paramedics arrived within minutes, pushing through the crowd of horrified guests. They worked quickly, loading Vanessa onto a stretcher, attaching monitors, inserting an IV. "What happened?" one of them asked. "I don't know," he sobbed. "We were toasting. She was fine. Then she just collapsed." I stood silently beside my son, my arm around his shaking shoulders, the picture of maternal support. "We need to go now," the paramedic said. "You can ride with us, sir." Thomas looked at me, torn. "Mom?" "Go," I urged. "She needs you. I'll follow in my car." As they rushed Vanessa out, I remained behind for just a moment. I picked up her champagne glass, my poisoned champagne glass, and placed it carefully in my purse. Evidence. What would you have done in my position? Watched helplessly as your child's new spouse tried to murder you? Called out the poisoner and destroyed your son's wedding day? Or done exactly what I did, turned the tables and let the would-be killer taste her own medicine? As I walked calmly to my car, keys in hand, I had no idea what would await us at the hospital would be even more shocking than what had just happened. Because Vanessa's collapse was just the beginning of the nightmare. I followed the ambulance to Atlanta Memorial Hospital, my hands steady on the wheel despite the storm raging inside me. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road as I rehearsed what I would say, how I would behave. For Thomas, I needed to be the concerned mother-in-law, not the woman who had just turned a murder attempt back on its perpetrator. At the hospital, I found Thomas pacing the emergency waiting room, his tuxedo jacket discarded, bow tie hanging loose around his neck. When he saw me, he collapsed into my arms like he used to do as a child after a nightmare. "Mom," his voice cracked, "they won't tell me anything." I held him tight, stroking his hair. "Doctors need time to work, son. We have to be patient." Back at Rosewood Manor, chaos had erupted after our departure. Kyle called my cell phone, his voice tight with tension. "Mrs. Green, it's madness here. Half the guests are leaving, the others are huddled in groups speculating. Should I tell them anything specific?" "Just that Vanessa fell ill suddenly and is receiving care," I replied, keeping my voice steady as Thomas watched me. "Thank everyone for coming and apologize for the disruption." Kyle hesitated. "There's something else. The wedding planner found Vanessa's purse. She wants to know if she should bring it to the hospital." My pulse quickened. "Yes, that would be helpful. Thomas might need her ID or insurance card." After hanging up, I sat beside Thomas, holding his trembling hands between mine. His face was ashen, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "This can't be happening," he whispered. "We were supposed to leave for our honeymoon tonight, the Caribbean. She was so excited." I nodded sympathetically, wondering if Vanessa had planned for me to die before their plane took off, a tragic phone call interrupting their first romantic dinner, Thomas rushing home to plan his mother's funeral while his new wife pretended to comfort him. "Did Vanessa have any health issues?" I asked carefully. "Anything she mentioned, even in passing?" Thomas shook his head. "She was perfectly healthy, always talking about her fitness routine, her special diet." His voice broke. Oh God, Mom, what if it's something serious? What if... Don't think that way, I interrupted, squeezing his hands. She's young and strong. The doctors will figure it out. 3 hours passed in that sterile waiting room. Thomas alternated between anxious pacing and slumping beside me in exhausted silence. Other wedding guests arrived, Vanessa's maid of honor looking bewildered, Kyle bringing coffee and concerned glances my way, the wedding planner clutching Vanessa's white satin purse. Her things, the planner said, handing the purse to Thomas. I thought she might need them. Thomas took it absently, placing it on the chair beside him without opening it. Finally, a doctor emerged, clipboard in hand. Family of Vanessa Mitchell? Thomas jumped up. I'm her husband. We just got married today. The doctor's expression softened with sympathy. Sir, your wife has experienced a severe reaction to a substance in her system. We've stabilized her, but she remains unconscious. A substance? Thomas repeated. What do you mean? We're running toxicology tests now, but initial results indicate something that affected her central nervous system, possibly a potent sedative combined with another agent. It's unusual. Thomas swayed slightly. I steadied him with a hand on his arm. Are you saying she was drugged? He asked incredulously. That's impossible. We were at our wedding. She just had champagne, the same as everyone else. The doctor glanced at his notes. We'll know more when the full tox screen comes back. For now, we've notified hospital security as a precaution, and I should tell you that in cases like this, police involvement is standard procedure. Police. The word hung in the air between us. Can I see her? Thomas asked, his voice small. Briefly. She's in the ICU, room 412. A nurse will take you. As Thomas followed the nurse, I remained in the waiting room, my mind racing. Police would ask questions. They might test the champagne glasses. Would they find mine in my purse? I needed to dispose of it, but how? The wedding planner touched my arm. Mrs. Green, this is horrible. Is there anything I can do? You've done more than enough, I assured her. Why don't you go home? I'll call if we need anything. After she left, only Kyle remained beside me. Mrs. Green, he said softly, I've known Thomas my whole life. I've known you just as long. If there's something I should know. Our eyes met in silent understanding. Kyle had always been perceptive. Just be here for Thomas, I replied carefully. He's going to need true friends in the days ahead. Kyle nodded and squeezed my hand before heading to the cafeteria for more coffee. Alone at last, I glanced at Vanessa's purse, sitting unattended on the chair. Thomas had gone upstairs without it. My fingers itched with temptation. What secrets might it hold? Evidence of her plan? More poison? I looked around. The waiting room was momentarily empty. With quick, practiced movements, the same that had served me when confiscating notes in my classroom, I picked up the purse and opened it. Inside was the usual: lipstick, compact, tissues, phone. But tucked into an inner pocket, my fingers found something hard and rectangular. I pulled it out, a small velvet box that didn't look like makeup or jewelry. I opened it carefully. Inside lay a second vial, identical to the one Vanessa had used earlier, alongside a folded piece of paper. My hand shook as I unfolded it, revealing a handwritten note. For Thomas's mother, Phase 1 tonight at reception. Phase 2 tomorrow morning if needed. Untraceable. Death will appear natural. Heart failure in elderly woman with a history of cardiac issues in family. My blood ran cold. I didn't have a history of cardiac issues, but Richard, my late husband, Thomas's father, had died of a heart attack. She had researched us thoroughly, constructing a plausible scenario. Beneath that note was another. All set for policy payout. Thomas completely unaware. After funeral, suggest immediate trip. He'll be too grief-stricken to question moving assets. Contact Jay when complete for next steps. Who was Jay? Footsteps echoed in the hallway. I quickly photographed the notes with my phone, then returned everything to the purse exactly as I had found it.
except for the second vial, which I slipped into my pocket alongside the first. Thomas returned just as I settled back into my chair, his face drawn with worry. "She looks so small in that hospital bed," he whispered, collapsing beside me. "The doctor said they've called in a toxicologist. They're treating this as a potential poisoning, Mom. Who would want to hurt Vanessa?" I held my son as he broke down, his body shaking with sobs. Over his shoulder, I saw 2 uniformed police officers enter the waiting room, their expressions grim as they surveyed the scene. "Thomas Green," one called out, "we have some questions about what happened at your wedding reception today." Thomas pulled away from me, wiping his eyes. "Yes, that's me." As the officers approached, Vanessa's purse slipped from the chair to the floor, its contents spilling out across the linoleum. Thomas knelt to gather them: the lipstick, the compact, the phone, and the velvet box, which fell open at his feet. The next part of the story shocked everyone at the reception, but what Thomas discovered as he picked up that fallen box would change everything we thought we knew about Vanessa Mitchell and reveal a conspiracy more twisted than I could have imagined.
Thomas's fingers froze midair as he stared at the open velvet box. The small vial gleamed under the harsh hospital lights, the folded paper half visible beside it. His hand trembled as he picked up the note. "What is this?" he whispered, unfolding the paper. I held my breath, torn between protecting my son from the truth and letting him see the monster he had married. Before I could decide, one of the police officers stepped forward. "Sir, I'll need to see that," he said firmly, holding out his gloved hand. Thomas looked up, confusion etched across his face. "I don't understand. This is about my mother. Why does my wife have this?" The officer took the box carefully, reading the note with a deepening frown. He motioned to his partner, who pulled out an evidence bag. "Mr. Green, we need to speak with you privately. And we'll need to take this as evidence." The next 4 hours blurred together in a storm of questions, statements, and revelations. The police interviewed us separately, Thomas in a small consultation room, me in a corner of the waiting area. I told them everything. The overheard phone conversation, the vial I'd seen Vanessa drop into my champagne, the glass switch. I omitted only that I'd already searched her purse before it fell. "Mrs. Green, why didn't you call for help immediately when you saw her tamper with your drink?" the officer asked. "Would you have believed me?" I countered softly. "A possessive mother making accusations against her son's bride on their wedding day? I needed proof." He nodded, writing in his notepad. By midnight, the toxicology report confirmed what I already knew. Vanessa had ingested a combination of drugs, a powerful sedative, and a compound that induced symptoms mimicking cardiac arrest, the same compound mentioned in her note for Phase 2. "It's a sophisticated cocktail," the toxicologist explained to the officers while Thomas and I listened. "The first agent incapacitates, the second stops the heart. Without specific testing, it would appear natural, especially in someone with a family history of heart problems." Thomas's face drained of color. "She thought my mom had heart issues because Dad died that way. The dose she ingested was significant, but not fatal, because we intervened quickly. Had Mrs. Green consumed it, given her age and weight?" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. At 2 a.m., a detective joined us, her face grave as she set a table between us. "Mr. Green, we've received some troubling information from the insurance company. 3 weeks ago, a policy was taken out on your mother's life for $2 million, with you listed as the primary beneficiary and your wife as the secondary. The paperwork appears to have your signature." She slid a document across the table. Thomas stared at it, then at the signature at the bottom. "That's not my handwriting. I never signed this." "We suspected as much," the detective nodded.
Forgery will be added to the charges. Thomas put his head in his hands. I don't understand. Why would she do this? We don't need money. I'm happy with my teaching job. She makes good money in pharmaceutical sales. The detective exchanged glances with the officers. About that, Mr. Green, we've contacted the company listed on your wife's employment records. They have no employee by the name of Vanessa Mitchell. Thomas's head snapped up. What? We're still investigating her background, but initial findings suggest much of what she told you about herself may be fabricated. My son looked like he might collapse. I moved to sit beside him, wrapping my arm around his shoulders like I used to when he was small and the world had wounded him. But this was no skinned knee or schoolyard taunt. This was betrayal beyond measure. There's more, the detective continued gently. We've received communications on your wife's phone with an individual identified only as Jay. The conversations detail plans regarding your mother and the insurance payout. Plans to kill her, Thomas said flatly, the reality finally sinking in. Yes, and plans for after, including moving assets and leaving the country. Thomas turned to me, his eyes swimming with tears. Mom, I had no idea. I swear to you, I knew nothing about any of this. I believed him. My son could never be part of such cruelty. But I also saw the moment he fully accepted what his wife had done, what she had planned to do. His face hardened, grief giving way to a cold anger I'd never seen in him before. I want to see her, he said suddenly. Thomas, I don't think I need to see her, he insisted. I need to know why. The detective nodded. She's conscious now. Officers are with her, and she's been informed of her rights. You can have 5 minutes. I waited outside Vanessa's room as Thomas went in alone. Through the glass window, I watched my son approach his bride's hospital bed. She was pale against the white sheets, an IV in her arm, monitors beeping steadily beside it. When she saw Thomas, she reached for him, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw her lips moving frantically, saw her clutching at his hand, pleading, denying, lying even now. Thomas stood still as stone, listening. Then he pulled his hand away and said something that made her expression change from desperate to furious. She lunged for him, monitor screaming as she tore at her IV. Nurses rushed in as Thomas backed away, his face a mask of disgust and heartbreak. When he emerged, he walked past me toward the waiting room. I followed him, giving him space until he finally stopped at a window overlooking the hospital parking lot, now empty except for a few cars beneath flickering lights. He said it was all a misunderstanding, that someone must have planted those things in her purse, that she loves me and would never hurt you. I remained silent, letting him process. Then I asked her about Jay, and her whole demeanor changed. She said I'd never understand, that we could have had everything. She actually tried to convince me we could still make it work, that we could be rich, start over somewhere new. Oh, Thomas, I whispered. My entire marriage was a lie. Every kiss, every promise, every plan we made. I married a stranger today, Mom. The detective approached quietly, a tablet in her hand. Mr. Green, Mrs. Green, we've received security footage from the wedding venue that you should see. She played the video. Crisp, clear images from a camera in the reception hall's corner. It showed Vanessa slipping away from the dance floor to meet someone near the service entrance. A tall man in a server's uniform, his back to the camera. They exchanged words, then he handed her something small that she tucked into her bodice. The silver vial. We can't see his face, the detective explained, but we're reviewing all footage to identify him. As the video continued, Vanessa returned to the reception, and the man turned slightly, just enough to reveal part of his profile before he disappeared through the door. Thomas gasped, gripping the window ledge for support. "That's impossible," he breathed. "You recognize him?" the detective asked sharply. Thomas nodded, his face ashen. "It's Gregory Phillips, my best friend from college, the one who introduced me to Vanessa in the first place." The detective's eyes widened. "The same Gregory Phillips who's the beneficiary of your life insurance policy? The one your wife insisted you update last month?" I felt the floor shift beneath me as the full truth crashed down. It had never been just about me. The plan had been far more extensive, more calculated than we'd realized. They had planned to kill us both. Me first, then Thomas after the insurance payout. The monitor tracking Vanessa's heart rate flatlined down the hall, alarms blaring as medical staff rushed to her room. Comment justice if you think what happened next was deserved. Because the woman who tried to murder me, the woman my son had married just hours before, had just gone into cardiac arrest from her own poison, while her accomplice was still walking free. And he was coming for us.
The doctors managed to stabilize Vanessa, though she remained in critical condition. Her body had fought against the very poison she'd intended for me. Poetic justice, perhaps, but cold comfort as we faced the expanding darkness of her conspiracy. Police placed us under protection immediately. 2 officers stationed outside Thomas's apartment as we gathered essential items. Neither of us could bear returning to the wedding venue for our things. Thomas moved through his home like a ghost, flinching when he saw Vanessa's possessions, her robe draped over a chair, her novel on the nightstand with a bookmark still in place, her toothbrush beside his in the bathroom cup. "I slept beside her for 2 years," he whispered, staring at their bed. I told her my deepest fears, my childhood memories, my dreams for our future. Was any of it real for her? I had no answer that wouldn't wound him further. Detective Rivera arrived the next morning with a team of forensic accountants and digital specialists. They transformed Thomas's living room into a temporary command center, laptops open, documents spread across every surface. "We've located Gregory Phillips," Rivera announced. "He emptied his bank accounts yesterday morning and purchased a ticket to Venezuela, 9 extradition country. Fortunately, we apprehended him at the airport just before boarding." Thomas sat motionless on the couch, hands clasped between his knees. "Is he talking?" "Once we presented the evidence, like a waterfall." Rivera set a folder on the coffee table. "They've been partners for years, romantically and criminally. They target wealthy individuals or those with substantial insurance potential, then split the proceeds." "But we're not wealthy. I'm a retired teacher. Thomas is an elementary school teacher." Rivera nodded. "That's what makes your case unusual. Typically, they pursue higher value targets. But when we searched Phillips' apartment, we found this." She placed a yellow newspaper clipping on the table. The headline read, "Local teacher receives unexpected inheritance. Dolores Green, sole beneficiary of former student's estate." I gasped. 10 years ago, a former student, a quiet boy who'd grown into a successful investor, had left me a modest inheritance out of gratitude for my encouragement. The money had helped me renovate my small house and establish a retirement fund. "They researched their marks thoroughly," Rivera continued. "According to Phillips, they believed you had significantly more assets hidden away. The student who left you money had been quite wealthy. Franklin had millions, but he left the bulk to charitable foundations. I received a small portion, meaningful to me, but hardly worth killing for." "They didn't know that," Rivera said. "They thought you were sitting on a fortune."
The investigation revealed a pattern stretching back 5 years. 6 married couples across 3 states, all matching the same method. Vanessa, whose real name was Victoria Winters, would cultivate relationships with targeted individuals. Gregory would play supporting roles, friend, colleague, sometimes even marriage counselor, gaining access and trust. In each case, Rivera explained, the targeted spouse died from apparent natural causes shortly after large insurance policies were established. The surviving spouse would inherit, then mysteriously die months later, leaving everything to a distant relative or friend, Victoria or Gregory using false identities. Thomas pressed his hands against his temples. They were planning this from the beginning, from the moment Greg happened to introduce me to Vanessa at that faculty party. Yes, and this wasn't their first attempt on your mother. My blood chilled as Rivera opened another file, displaying photos of my car's brake lines from an inspection 6 months earlier. The mechanic noted these had been tampered with but assumed it was wear and tear. He replaced them. She looked at me directly. You were extremely fortunate. The cut was designed to cause failure at highway speeds. Thomas's head snapped up. The weekend Vanessa suggested Mom drive to Savannah for that teacher convention. The one you insisted on me having fly to instead because you said driving alone was too tiring at my age. I saved you without even knowing, he whispered. But the most damning evidence came from Gregory's confession. He described their ultimate plan with chilling detachment. My death at the wedding reception from apparent heart failure, followed by Thomas's suicide during their honeymoon, overcome with grief after losing both parents to heart conditions, suggesting a genetic predisposition that had haunted him. The insurance policies would have paid out over $4 million total. With your assets, they'd have disappeared with nearly $5 million. While Thomas absorbed this horror, I noticed him growing increasingly withdrawn. He'd step outside for phone calls, returning with reddened eyes. He'd check his watch obsessively, claiming headaches when I asked questions. On the 3rd morning after the wedding, I woke early to find Thomas's bedroom empty, his bed unslept in. Panic seized me until I heard voices in the kitchen, Thomas and Rivera speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "Are you absolutely certain?" Thomas was asking. "The evidence is conclusive. I'm sorry." I stepped into the doorway. They fell silent immediately, both turning to me with identical expressions of concern. "What's going on?" I demanded. Thomas cleared his throat. "Mom, sit down, please. I prefer to stand when people are keeping secrets from me. Haven't we had enough deception?" Rivera nodded to Thomas. "She deserves to know." My son approached slowly, taking my hands in his. "Mom, the police found something when they were tracing Vanessa and Gregory's communication history. Something about Dad." "Your father? Richard has been dead for 20 years. "That's just it," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "They found records, old photographs, documents connecting Dad to Victoria before she became Vanessa. They knew each other, Mom, back in college." "That's impossible," I whispered. "There's more." Thomas guided me to a chair despite my resistance. Rivera's team discovered unusual deposits into Dad's accounts the year before he died, large deposits with no clear source. "What are you saying?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "They're saying your husband's heart attack might not have been natural," Rivera stated quietly. "They're exhuming his body tomorrow morning." The room tilted around me. Richard, my Richard, connected to these monsters? The loving father who read bedtime stories to Thomas, who brought me wildflowers every anniversary, whose death had shattered our world? "No," I said firmly. "You're wrong. There's an explanation." Thomas's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, then quickly tucked the phone away, avoiding my eyes. "I need to go out for a while," he mumbled. "Now? In the middle of all this?" I asked incredulously. "It's important. Police business." He grabbed his keys, still not meeting my gaze. "Rivera will stay with you." As he rushed toward the door, his phone fell from his pocket. I reached it before he could, my teacher's reflexes still quick despite my age. The text displayed on the screen.
Package received from R. Meet at the old place. Bring the original documents like we discussed. Destroy this message. The sender was listed simply as J. The truth about Thomas will leave you speechless. Because in that moment, staring at my son's guilty face, I had to consider the unthinkable. Was my beloved boy part of this conspiracy all along?
Thomas! My voice shattered the silence. What is this? My son's face drained of color as he stared at the phone in my hand. Detective Rivera moved swiftly between us, her hand moving to her weapon. "Who is Jay?" I demanded, "and what documents are you bringing them?" Thomas raised his hand slowly. "Mom, please, it's not what you think." "Then explain," Rivera commanded. "Now." What Thomas revealed next changed everything we thought we knew. "Jay is Detective Javier Martinez," Thomas said, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "He's undercover in an FBI operation. They've been tracking Vanessa and Gregory's crime ring for years." Rivera narrowed her eyes. "Why wasn't I informed?" "Federal jurisdiction," Thomas replied. "They approached me 3 months ago after identifying Vanessa as Victoria Winters. They needed evidence to connect her to the previous murders." My knees buckled. Rivera caught me, helping me to the couch. "You knew? You knew what she was?" Thomas knelt before me, taking my hands. "Yes, and it's been killing me not to tell you. The FBI swore me to secrecy. Any leak could have jeopardized the entire operation. The wedding," I began, "was supposed to be the final piece of evidence," Thomas finished. "They needed Vanessa to attempt the murder, to catch her in the act. They had agents posing as waitstaff, ready to intervene before you drank the champagne." "But I switched the glasses," I said numbly. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "You weren't supposed to be in danger at all." When she collapsed, when I realized what had happened, Mom, I've never been more terrified. Rivera was already on her phone, verifying Thomas's claims. Her curt nods confirmed the truth. The next week unfolded like scenes from a movie I never wanted to star in. The FBI officially took over the case. Vanessa, Victoria, recovered enough to stand trial alongside Gregory. The evidence against them was overwhelming. 7 murders across 3 states, millions in fraudulent insurance claims, and now attempted murder charges. The courthouse was packed for the preliminary hearing. I sat rigid in the front row, Thomas beside me, as Victoria and Gregory were led in wearing orange jumpsuits and handcuffs. Victoria's eyes found mine, cold, calculating, without a hint of remorse. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Harriman entered, her robes flowing behind her as she took her place on the bench. After the formalities, the prosecutor approached the stand, outlining the charges in methodical detail. "Your Honor," she concluded, "the state has evidence linking the defendants to multiple homicides dating back 5 years, all following the same pattern. We're seeking denial of bail and maximum sentences for both defendants." Victoria's attorney rose. "Your Honor, my client wishes to address the court." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge frowned. "This is highly unusual at this stage, Counselor." "I understand, Your Honor, but Ms. Winters insists." Judge Harriman considered, then nodded curtly. "Proceed," briefly. Victoria stood, elegant even in prison orange. "Your Honor, I wish to enter a guilty plea to all charges." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Her attorney looked stunned. "Furthermore," Victoria continued, her voice carrying clearly, "I wish to provide full testimony against all members of our organization, including those not yet charged." The prosecutor approached her table hurriedly, conferring with her assistants.
Thomas gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. "Ms. Winters," the judge said carefully, "you understand the implications of what you're offering." Victoria smiled, that same cold smile I remembered from the wedding. "Perfectly, Your Honor. In exchange for consideration in sentencing, I will reveal everyone involved in our operation." Her eyes flickered to the back of the courtroom. Everyone. The judge called a recess to consider the offer. As we filed out, FBI Agent Martinez, the mysterious J from the text, approached us. "Mrs. Green, Thomas?" He nodded. "This is unexpected, but potentially beneficial. If she talks, she's playing a game," I interrupted. "Victoria doesn't do anything without an angle." Martinez smiled grimly. "We're well aware, but we'll use her to get what we need." When court resumed, Victoria's deal was tentatively accepted pending verification of her information. As she was led out, she paused beside me. "Dolores, you switched those glasses because you knew. You were always watching. But did you ever watch Richard closely enough?" Guards pulled her away before I could respond, her laughter echoing off marble walls. That night, the FBI arrived at Thomas's apartment with the preliminary results from Richard's exhumation. The lead pathologist looked grim as he opened his folder. "Mrs. Green, there were traces of the same compound found in your champagne glass." "My husband was murdered?" I whispered. "By whom?" Martinez hesitated, then placed a faded photograph on the table. It showed a young Richard with his arm around a woman. Though 20 years younger, I recognized her instantly. "Victoria?" I gasped. "No, miss," Martinez said quietly. "Her mother, Patricia Winters." The photograph slipped from my fingers as the final terrible truth dawned on me. Victoria hadn't chosen my family by accident. This wasn't about money. It was about revenge. Was justice truly served? Let me know your thoughts below, because while Victoria and Gregory would spend their lives in prison, the reason behind their vendetta against my family was about to expose a secret my husband had taken to his grave, a secret that would destroy everything I thought I knew about our life together.
Victoria's full confession revealed the truth that had haunted my family for decades. Patricia Winters and Richard had been lovers during his college years, before he met me. When Patricia became pregnant, Richard had panicked and abandoned her. She later died during childbirth, leaving Victoria to be raised by her grandmother. Victoria grew up with one purpose: to destroy the man who had abandoned her mother and, by extension, his entire family. Richard's unexpected heart attack had robbed her of personal vengeance, so she shifted her focus to me and Thomas, the family he had chosen over her. The courtroom fell silent as the judge delivered the sentences. Life imprisonment without parole for both Victoria and Gregory. As they were led away, Victoria turned to me one last time. "We're blood, you know. Thomas is my half-brother. Doesn't that count for anything?" I met her gaze steadily. Family isn't just blood. It's love, sacrifice, and truth. You never understood that. 6 months have passed since that day. Thomas and I have slowly rebuilt our lives from the shattered pieces left behind. The FBI helped us sell his apartment. Neither of us could bear to keep it, and he's moved temporarily into my guest room while looking for a new place. We talk now. Really, talk about Richard and the man he was. The good father and husband we knew, but also the flawed young man who made a terrible mistake and never found the courage to make it right. Richard has struggled to reconcile these two versions of his father, just as I have with my husband. "Do you think he ever wanted to tell us?" Thomas asked me one evening as we sorted through old family photos. "I believe he did," I answered honestly. "But fear is a powerful thing.
He was afraid of losing us, the people he truly loved. The hardest lesson I've learned through all of this is that those closest to us hold the power to hurt us most deeply. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it never quite mends the same way. But without trust, we cannot love fully. I've also learned that sometimes the clearest sight comes through tears. I see now what I couldn't before, how precious genuine connection is, how vigilant we must be against deception, and how courage often means facing truths we'd rather ignore. Thomas starts teaching again next week. I've begun volunteering at a support group for victims of family trauma. Life continues, different but determined. And when I raise a glass now, be it water, wine, or champagne, I look carefully at what it contains, who handed it to me, and what price might come with drinking it. If this story helped you see your family differently, subscribe for more eye-opening true stories that reveal the complex reality behind closed doors. Because the most important lesson I've learned is this: love without honesty is merely performance, but love with truth, even difficult truth, is the only foundation strong enough to build a life upon.